part 2 on his book, Beauty, What It Is and Why It Matters. We're breaking down man-made beauty, the fine arts, music, decorative arts, writing, architecture, even culinary art, and much more. Today, on The Simple Truth, we consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong, chaste heart of St. Joseph. Again, our guest today, Dr. John Mark Miravalle. He's a Catholic husband and father, professor of systematic and moral theology at Mount St. Mary's Seminary in Maryland. Seminary.msmary.edu is the website. He's also an author of several books, including The Drug, the Soul, and God, a Catholic moral perspective on antidepressants. Also, How to Feel Good and How Not to, the ethics of using marijuana, alcohol, antidepressants, and other mood-altering drugs. Thinking Clearly, Catholic Philosophy for a Culture in Chaos, and the one we're talking about today, Beauty, What It Is and Why It Matters. You can get it at sophiainstitute.com, sophiainstitute.com. All right, Dr. John Mark Miravalle, thank you so much for being back with us today. Welcome back. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me again. This is fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I really look forward to these conversations. So just to kind of give the lay of the land up front here. So we're diving into part 2 of the book, Man-Made Beauty, which part 1 of the book, The Nature of Beauty. We talked about that last time we had you on. And then part 3, Beauty and the Supernatural. So that's to come. That's going to be a great section. But here in part 2, Man-Made Beauty, we're getting into a chapter on art and the artists, which is the nature of fine art generally and the purpose of the arts and the moral obligations of artists as such. Also a chapter on beautiful patterns, which is the art of music and decoration, and then also beautiful representations, which is arts that signify or depict, and then beautiful functionality, arts that beautify the satisfaction of some physical need. So yeah, we're going to get into this, and as we get in, I think you're going to find this is quite interesting stuff. So to dive right in here, you write in the book, we were designed for beautiful images, just as we were designed for air, sleep, food, and friendship. You cite Saint John Paul II, who wrote in his letter to artists, "Society needs artists just as it needs scientists, technicians, workers, professional people, witnesses of the faith, teachers, fathers, and mothers who ensure the growth of the person and the development of the community." What's wrong with art for art's sake?
Well, art for art's sake, as Jacques Maritain says, is essentially, if it's meant seriously, it's an idol. Because as Vatican II says, the only thing on earth that is or should be willed for its own sake is the perfection of the human person. So if there's something other than the human person that you are making an end in itself, well, that's something that you're willing to sacrifice the human to, and that's probably your best definition of an idol. So art is supposed to be for the sake of human flourishing, like any other man-made thing. And of course, ultimately, and we'll get to this later, but ultimately, human flourishing only reaches its zenith if it leads us to God. So art is not for the sake of art. Art is for the sake of us. And we have to make it that way, and we have to use it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you give us some good distinctions as you define terms in this chapter. You say the artist, someone who has become excellent at making something. You also say being a good, virtuous person is superior to art. Art is doing good work, and fine art is producing an artifact or image or arrange a performance for the sake of realizing a beautiful image. And then at another point, you say art is human activity seeking to create a beautiful image. And so we're getting at it here. You also write here that sometimes even Christians, you hear Christians even talking this way. They quote ad nauseum the line from Dostoevsky's The Idiot, quote, "Beauty will save the world." And they somehow astonishingly interpret this quotation to mean that art will save the world, as though anything created, let alone paintings, symphonies, or novels, could save the world. What is the right interpretation of this line, "Beauty will save the world"?
Yeah, so beauty means the uncreated beauty. It means God. It means God especially made manifest to us in Jesus Christ. So what I want to say is art is a means to some further end. Now, it's an indispensable means, just like food is an indispensable means to some further end, the end of nutrition and health. Art, again, in that broad range of something that is seeking to promote beauty, order, and surprise, that's an indispensable means. We all need it, but it is a means. The end is our perfection. And so whenever we're talking about making something or consuming something, right, and consuming a piece of art, for instance, the fundamental question should be, is this good for me? Is this leading me closer to God? Is this making me more virtuous? Is this allowing me to rest and become enthusiastic with the goodness and in the goodness of reality? Because if it's not, then you're missing the point.
Yeah, excellent. We're talking with Dr. John Mark Miravalle, and his book is Beauty, What It Is and Why It Matters. We're diving into part 2 of that book today. You can go back, check out part 1 in a previous episode. Part 3 is yet to come. But you're right here, Dr. Miravalle, that, quote, egoism wrecks everything good, and not just in art. If egoism is a universal temptation, there are also presumably spiritual hazards to which artists are especially prone. What can you tell us about these spiritual hazards to which artists are especially prone?
Yeah, there's a couple. One of the main ones I was talking about there is with egoism. And this is true in all kinds of jobs. You make the job more about self-service than other service. So the artist can see his main goal has to build himself a reputation, to become renowned, to be celebrated by either the masses or by the Illuminati of the art community. That's all bad. That's all wrong. The reason you do anything is to glorify God and serve your neighbor. The artist should be making his art because he believes it will glorify God, and it will actually be really good for people to receive this beauty, which, as we talked about last time, is coextensive with truth and goodness. So the artist has to be very careful that the art is not fundamentally about him. And we all have to do that, right? You have to do that with this podcast. I have to do it with my classes. It's very easy for something to become about us instead of about the people it's supposed to serve. That's certainly true in the world of art. The other thing the artists have to watch out for is, because art seeks to make beauty concrete in some sensible image, something visible, something that you hear, the artist has to make sure that he doesn't become dominated by his senses and by a need for excitement. A lot of artists' lives are famously characterized by real intemperance in the realm of the senses, in the realm of needing new sensational experiences all the time. The artist has to be like the rest of us. He has to work hard, or she has to work hard. She has to exercise self-restraint. She or he has to recognize that not every moment is going to be some sort of aesthetic high, and he or she has to do good work in service of God and humanity, just like the rest of us. And the sooner all artists recognize that, the happier they'll be and the better work they'll do.
Yeah, great stuff here with Dr. John Mark Miravalle. You also write, when it comes to the obligations of the culture as a whole, there should be a general recognition that the most virtuous, most saintly members of society, not the most artistically gifted, are the ones who do the most for the common good. You go on to say, just as our Lord, not art, is the source of our salvation, so the saints, not necessarily the artists, are our earthly models to extol. They're the ones who do the most for society, the true heroes in our midst. That being said, we know that artists don't need to be irrational or egotistical or lack virtue, because we do have great saints who are also great artists. St. Hildegard of Bingen was a composer. St. Thomas More was a novelist. St. John Paul II was a playwright. St. Robert Southwell was a poet. Blessed Fra Angelico was a painter, as reputedly was St. Luke. Even the great architect Antoni Gaudi's his cause for beatification is underway. These men and women show that it's possible to be a wholly grounded person as well as an artist. Any encouragement for those who are striving to do both?
Yeah, put sanctity first. That's the main thing. Many of us, and myself included, it's always a temptation to say, look, if I do good work, if I do something excellent that seems to really help people and is kind of getting positive feedback, then it's okay that I still struggle with my vices, that I don't really pursue moral perfection. The first thing you got to do is cut that out. You got to say, no. I recently read John of the Cross. He said, God could have the angels do everything we do better. The reason he has us do it is so that we can become the kind of people whose company God enjoys. So whatever you do, remember the main thing is to become a saint. And then secondly, as God affords opportunity, you try to do good work, you try to work hard, again, not for the sake of your art or your professional excellence, but for the sake of the people you're trying to serve. You put thought and effort and skill into whatever you're doing, particularly in the fine arts, and you know that will serve people better.
Yeah, great stuff here. Dr. John Mark Miravalle is with us again. We're talking about his book, Beauty, What It Is and Why It Matters. You can get it at sophiainstitute.com, sophiainstitute.com. Yeah, it makes me think of, again, Pope St. John Paul II, St. John Paul the Great, I like to call him. And his writing, I think it was an apostolic letter on the new millennium, Novo Inuente Millennium, I think, something like that. And in there, I mean, that he lays out a whole plan, right, to keep Christ at the center, and then like the steps, what you need to do. And it's right there. The plan for the millennium is right there in that writing. But one of the things he talks about is the art of prayer. And I think that's what you're getting at as well, that these things come together in this striving by God's grace for holiness. We're going to be right back. Stay tuned.
This is Jesuit Father Robert McTagg, your daily host of the Catholic Current, and I'm asking for your help. Folks have been asking me to answer questions on the air, so I'm asking you to send questions to my mailbag. We can do this good work together. Send us your questions at thestationofthecross.com/askfather. That's thestationofthecross.com/askfather. I look forward to hearing from you.
Please join us in a prayer to St. Anthony of Padua. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O dear protector, St. Anthony, on this day we direct our fervent prayer to you, asking you to hear us and to intercede for us. We are parents who ask for peace in our families, our worthy occupations, and our daily bread. We are children who ask for divine assistance and protection in the hope of a successful and happy future. We are the needy poor, the afflicted, and sinners who come to you for help and grace. Therefore, speak on our behalf to that child whom you hold in your arms, and we are sure of being heard. Amen.
The Station of the Cross has many ways to keep you informed about our programming. You can view the highlights of our primetime programming schedule or the full 24/7 programming grid at both thestationofthecross.com or the free iCatholic Radio app. Just search under the Programming tab. Our website also offers a printable version for your convenience.
Here. Very blessed to have Dr. John Mark Miravalle with us discussing his book, Beauty, What It Is and Why It Matters. We're going through part 2 of the book today. And if you're tracking with us where we are in the book, getting into chapter 8 on beautiful patterns right now. And this is about arts devoted to beautiful patterns, music and visually decorative arts. And you first give us a warning here, quote, "If the goal is to assault beauty rather than promote it, such a goal entails a war on the human person who was made for beauty and not ugliness." End of quote. Why give us this warning?
Oh, because a lot of people indulge in perverse sights and sounds. A lot of people, maybe particularly young people who are angry, want to feed their anger with disordered images. There's a wonderful book, I just finished reading it this week for the 20th time, called That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis. And a guy is being groomed by some basically demons for entry into an anti-Christian movement. And they bring him into a room where all the images in the room and the architecture, the structures, but also even dots on the wall, on the ceiling, on the table, they all have no order, and they force him to stare at it. Because order, as we said last time, is the expression of intelligence. It's the expression of harmony, integrity, of goodness. So to indulge in something that is disordered, whether it's an abrasive sound or a lack of harmony or some kind of lack of visual order, let alone stuff we'll talk about later, like just raw, violent images, that stuff is to attack our humanity. That stuff is to indulge in something disordered. That, I would say, if you're doing it for that reason, to indulge in that kind of art is sinful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good. It needs to be said, needs to be proclaimed. We appreciate that. And you also ask the question, what reason can be given for the sheer emotional power of music? Then you cite philosophers who argue because it moves in time and not space, it is similar to our souls in a way, and this connects with us on a deeper interior level. Thought this was quite interesting. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I was really convinced by something P.F. Strawson said, which is, if you subtract every sense except for hearing, you will have an experience of pure time. And after we die, when we're removed from the body, our souls will experience time, but will no longer be in space. So there is something angelic, there is something more spiritual about the sense of hearing. And since music is the art that takes place with hearing and is purely in time, it makes sense that it would have an immediate access to the soul. That's why sometimes just a few bars of a song is enough to move you to tears. There's no art form that affects our emotional life so quickly. And that's why the ancients, as well as certainly the saints, have said you have to be careful and selective about what you listen to. Because whether you know it or not, it is directing and impelling your soul in a certain direction. So we have to be careful.
Yeah, in fact, you go back to Plato and Aristotle for the fundamental insight, quote, the power of music imposes a moral imperative to be discriminating in how we produce and use it, to which you add, to the extent that music makes it harder to recognize truth and makes it harder to choose what is good, it constitutes a human failure. You also write that this puts an urgent moral obligation not only on the musician, but on the listener as well. Namely, don't listen to music that makes it harder for you to live a moral life. Or to put it even more specifically, don't listen to music that's likely to encourage your emotions in the wrong direction. Can you tell us a little bit more on this?
Sure. So an experience that I have, that I know a lot of people my age have, is, for example, they will indulge in emo type music that made them all kinds of emotional, all kinds of sort of depressed when they were teenagers, which probably wasn't a good idea back then either. But right now, I'm a dad with 7 kids and a husband. I can't indulge in music that is going to make me emotionally unstable. I have people who rely on my emotional stability. They need me to be strong, and they need me to be strong all the time. And I'm letting them down. I'm letting God down. I'm letting my vocation down if I indulge in some overly sentimental music of whatever kind that destabilizes me emotionally. So I have to be very careful not to do that. That's simply unjust and not virtuous. There's all kinds of examples like that. I tell people, look, if you're depressed, for the love, don't listen to Radiohead. If you're somebody who struggles with anger, don't listen to angry music. If you're somebody who struggles with lust, don't listen to hardly any pop music. If you're somebody who feels lame in your vocation. Don't listen to a bunch of ditzy party music that makes you wish you were having a better time. This is all part of what we were talking about before. Music, like all the arts, is supposed to be a means to the end of our virtue, our greater flourishing, and our greater happiness. So use it that way.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Put it in the right order. And then, regarding decorative art, as you get into that, you write that embellishment, in contradistinction to music, is one of the least sensational art forms. Designing visual patterns to spruce up objects, spaces, clothing, events, etc., subtly enriches human life without drawing much attention to the artists themselves. And then you tell this wonderful story about when you were 9 years old and you went to St. Peter's Basilica in Rome with your family. Can you share that with us?
Oh, sure. My dad, of course, if you've ever been to St. Peter's, the sheer size of it, all the statues, the incredible architecture. But Dad pointed to all the little details, all the little embellishments, the little carvings that were easy to miss. And he said, remember, some people spend their whole life just on those, just so to speak, sprucing it up. And in my family, that's really rung true. I have, for instance, my aunt does a lot of quilting, so she sends us quilts. Well, we put a quilt over our TV when we're not using it. So we don't have this big gray thing inviting us to watch TV. We have this beautiful, resting, but also complicated pattern. We have family friends, and she is an incredible knitter. And she's knit these beautiful stuff from her own sheep for my new baby. She knits this little hat and this little sweater, and everyone sees it and delights in it. So they're creating these sources of delight for everyday things, which, by the way, that's where we need delight. We need delight in everyday things. So the people who offer us that, I have a handmade mug that somebody crafted, and it has all these little details that are unique and special. We need delight in everyday life. The people who create embellishment are really doing us a great service.
Yeah, it's great to ponder this. You find little treasures, little gifts in doing so. You point one out here as you give us this at the end of I guess you're not sure what you're citing here. It looks like a meditation from George Santayana in his classic work Reason and Art. At the end here, this line, I mean, just incredible. What concerned the sculptor was today's labor and joy. Again, the full sentence here was, if the product was destined to fill a niche in the celestial edifice, that was God's business and might be left to him. What concerned the sculptor was today's labor and joy. And you have a strong reaction here, as do I, thinking about it. You write, what an allegory of the Christian life, ! Each of us doing our own little part to beautify God's church, ! And that idea really is quite beautiful, isn't it? Both orderly, the good order of the work being done, and surprising, finding a joy in doing the work when it is truly done solely to glorify God. How has this insight affected the way you go about your work and your experience of it?
Yeah, in this culture, we all look, in every culture, people have wanted to make a name for themselves. In this culture, particularly, where we can post anything all the time, video or written, everybody is feeling that urge to make a name for themselves more now than ever. The model, the great example of people who make beauty quietly, precisely, well, behind the scenes, I want my life to be like that. I want my life to be like the quilter, like the little sculptor, like the home deck person. Someone who makes everyone's life a little more beautiful in a way that doesn't run hardly any risk of calling attention to themselves. That's a beautiful way to live. That's how St. Joseph lived, right? That's how the greatest saints have lived, and saints that we'll never hear about till we get to heaven. There's my favorite homilist is Ronald Knox, and he says, remember, every saint If they're in a crowd and the spotlight flashes and it doesn't flash on them, it flashes on someone else, they feel relief. To be hidden, to be not famous, that's actually a Christian call for everyone. We should fear fame the way we fear wealth and power, as not evil in themselves, but things we should try to avoid if we can. Decoration, making things beautiful quietly, that's a vocation for all of us to aspire to.
What are your thoughts on someone who might say, this all sounds great, but I'm in survival mode with my work and everything, and I'm just trying to get through the day, trying to do my best, maybe to provide for my family. I don't have any time for even reading, for much leisure. I have Sunday, I put it aside for the Lord, but beyond that, I just don't have time to even think about these things, let alone do them. What would your advice be?
Yeah, there's a lot to that, but here's point one. How much time are you spending on social media? Because the average human being on planet Earth, I looked this up, is spending 2 hours and 45 minutes on social media. I think the average American is like 6 hours. So even those of us who are really stretched for time, if we look a little more closely, we find that we are actually spending time and often not on beautiful things. So yeah, it's going to require some creative purging to find out how we can participate in the production of beauty and how we can sit quietly and appreciate it. When we get to the visual arts, one of my my strong suggestions that was given to me actually by someone else is, at a certain point of the night, get rid of your phone for the night and start investing in beautiful art books, and sit down on the couch with your kids, by yourself, whomever, and open the art book and just start looking and start absorbing, because we do have a lot more time than we know. We just have to look for it.
Wow, this is so good, so helpful. Hope you're enjoying it, and we're only about halfway through here, so we got much more to go here with Dr. John Mark Miravalle. Again, the book Beauty, What It Is and Why It Matters, SophiaInstitute.com, SophiaInstitute.com. We're going to get into beautiful representations next, and then a lot there. So I've got quite a few questions on that. We're going to dive into those, and then beautiful functionality, which we're going to get into architecture. We're going to get into even culinary art, which is something that if you're like me, maybe haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. But again, to think about these things and how should we view them, and what is the right order, and where is the order, where is the surprise? We're going to be right back. Stay tuned.
At the Station of the Cross, we understand that life circumstances can affect your giving options, whether by moving or by switching banks and credit card numbers. Please let us know if recent changes have been made to your payment information so that we can better serve you as you continue to bless us with your financial support. Update your information today at thestationofthecross.com or by calling 1-877-888-6279, extension 104.
Hi, Joe McLean here, host of A Catholic Take, heard on the Station of the Cross each weekday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern. A bold synthesis of information and inspiration, keeping you up to date on the news and issues that you may have missed from a courageous Catholic perspective. That's A Catholic Take, weekday morning, 7 a.m. right here on the Station of the Cross and the free iCatholic Radio mobile app. Download it today. God love you.
Here at the Station of the Cross, we proudly bring the truths of the Catholic faith to countless listeners through radio and mobile devices, and we're grateful for the feedback we've received.
It just really connected me to my faith. I always considered myself 100% Catholic, but didn't really realize that I wasn't fully practicing my faith, so I learned so much through the Station on the Cross and began just getting deeper in my prayers and feeling just so much closer to God, and so well versed in learning more about the Bible and more about what actually it means to be Catholic. So it became very, very important to me, and I listen to the radio station daily, and I absolutely love it. I make it a regular practice of donating every time they have their fundraising, and just love it and wouldn't want to to ever go away.
If you've been blessed by listening to the Station of the Cross, let us know. Call 1-877-888-6279, extension 112. Then share your testimonial with us.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with Dr. John Mark Miravalle, talking about his excellent book, Beauty, What It Is and Why It Matters. SophiaInstitute.com is where you can get it. Getting into chapter 9 of the book now, beautiful representations. Again, we're in part 2 of the book. Hit part 1 in a previous time together, previous episode, and then part 3 is to come in an upcoming episode. But here in this chapter, beautiful representations, you write that that representation is a powerful means of communication, and it's possible to communicate evil or falsehood through images as well as through speech. And when that happens, it's a deeply immoral event. What do you have in mind here? What examples can you give us in terms of representation being used in this way, or the powerful means of communication that it is?
So the most obvious example that comes to mind, the one that's shredding our culture and in a sense the world, is pornography. So pornography is a representation of falsehood. It is a representation of lies. It is a manipulation, and it's everywhere. And once you've got it in, because representation is so strong, music can have a very sudden impact, but often it's kind of passing. Representation is very powerful, and it, especially visually, it will stay with you. Now, that's not just true of pornography. It can also be true of false depictions of relationships. It can be true of false depictions of family. It can be true of false depictions of sin. For instance, there's lots of movies which depict abortion as prudent or even compassionate. These are stories that are false. These are stories that are lies, and these are stories that you absorb the message without realizing that you are absorbing a message sometimes. So stories, images, representations, depictions, these have enormous power for how you will end up living your life. In fact, these kinds of images will largely determine the way you feel about things, which will largely determine the way you act, which will determine the kind of person you become, which will determine whether you end up in heaven or hell. So these have massive implications for your eternal destiny. You'll want to be really careful with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you also write, on the other hand, how much good is done by an image that communicates the way things really are and how good they're supposed to be. Can you give us some examples that come to mind of this?
Oh, most clearly, right? And we'll talk about the supernatural next time, but most clearly images of our Lord and Our Lady, or of the Holy Family. Images, for instance, I have an image, I think I might have told you last time, I have an image of Saint Joseph standing guard over Mary and Jesus while they're sleeping. That is an image that not only makes me celebrate the Savior's life, his birth, the flight into Egypt, but it makes me celebrate my vocation as a father. It makes me want to be like Saint Joseph. It makes me want to be what a man is supposed to be. Images of good fathers, images of good families, images of heroes, images simply of things going right when you expect them to go wrong, as a kind of paradigm of what Jesus does on the cross. Yeah, this stuff is the difference between living a happy life and living a sad one.
Yeah, you also go on to say that eagerness to communicate a truth or moral principle can, however, if not prudently directed, lead to the second kind of representation failure. This happens when an attempt is made to communicate truth or goodness, but not through an engaging sense image. In this case, at best, you get order without surprise. Can you give us any examples of this?
Oh, sure. People, and I have to be careful because I don't want to insult anything particularly that people like. But there are certain religious songs, there are certainly certain homilies, there are certain kinds. A lot of times this happened earlier, but let's say in the earlier part of the 20th century, where you basically had Catholic propaganda, where you had people saying good things, but in obvious cliche and hideously uncreative ways. And it totally turned people off. If you're going to evangelize, if you're going to speak the truth, as we said before, you have to do so in a creative way. You have to make an effort. You have to really try to get people excited by saying it in a new way and by showing it in a new way. So the creativity of beauty has to be there, because if it's not creative, creativity is a sign of life. If our faith is still alive, then we have to show it in new creative ways. Otherwise, we're doing something really wrong, and we're doing a disservice to the truth instead of making it appealing to the world.
Dr. John Mark Miravalle is with us. We're discussing his book, Beauty, What It Is and Why It Matters. You can get it at sophiainstitute.com. You give us this Maritain quote, quote, artists provide mankind with a spiritual food, which is intuitive experience, revelation, and beauty. And I very much like this quote from you, to deny people order and surprise, to act as though they should be content with orthodoxy and exhortation, that's dehumanizing. That's unjust to everyone involved. Anything further on this?
Yeah. If your kid asks you, why do we do this? Don't just repeat what you were told. Say it in a new way. Get their questions. Figure out where they're coming from and work with them. How many kids have said, yeah, I was raised Catholic, and all they did was repeat the same things. They never explained it. They told me what I had to do. They never said why. And it was just repressive and restrictive. John Paul II, we talked about already, what made him so marvelous, what made him such a great saint, was that he reframed the entire Christian message, all of doctrine, all of morals, in these new, creative, and really exciting ways. We got to do that, or we're selling people short. We've got to show them not just that this is true, not just that this is what's expected, but that this is beautiful and thrilling. I was talking to my dad today about G.K. Chesterton. G.K. Chesterton was the supreme genius at, let's frame this in a delightful, new, exciting way. We just need a lot more of that, and we all have to take responsibility in our particular zones of communication for trying to make it beautiful as well as true and good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need a lot more people calling for it as well, and we really appreciate you bringing this forward and helping us to understand it. Very, very helpful, again, to our ongoing formation, ongoing conversions. And you also give us this in the book. You go to Aquinas. You say, famously, Aquinas says that sight is the most spiritual, the most perfect, and the most universal of all the senses. And then you go on to say, while music, as we saw, has a very sudden, dramatic impact. Actually, let me just make sure I have that spot right here. I think, I missed where I was going here, but I had, the Aquinas, and then, okay, this is where I want to go. This is it. While music, as we saw, has a very sudden and dramatic impact, visual images are the ones that last, as you were mentioning earlier. Art itself is colloquially identified with visual representation, which is itself a tribute to our emphasis on the sense of sight. The visual artist, as we've noticed, seeks to express something he has perceived in reality in visible form. This demands that the artist be thoughtful and contemplative, as well as skilled in representing the fruits of his contemplation visually. Art flowing from contemplation does not so much attempt to copy reality as rather to capture the archetypes of all that is. Such art does not want to depict what everybody already sees, but to make visible what not everybody sees. What do you mean by capturing the archetypes of all that is?
Yeah. So let's take an example of someone who's looking for precision but not deeper truth. A police sketch artist, or even the guy who does the chalk outline of the body, right, for the police force. He's looking to make an exact replica. The artist is seeking, ideally, to present some profound truth through the symbols of his representation. So let me give you a great example. One of my favorite contemporary artists, actually he probably is my favorite contemporary artist, young guy, super Catholic, his name's Giovanni Gasparo. He has a painting called A Meal in Capernaum. And it's just a table and it's set for 4. But 3 of those spots are super messy. The bowl is full of the sauce and the dregs of the wine are in the cup and the napkins have been used and the utensils are all askew. But one of the places, that fourth place is perfectly neat. Nothing stained, nothing out of place. You know why? Because it's Martha's seat. That was the meal with Jesus, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And Martha kept her seat neat and clean. And she missed the meal. She missed the special time with Jesus. And so what is that showing, that simple image? It's showing us we have to be okay with mess, or we're going to miss the ultimate experiences. We're going to miss Christ and love and family. That kind of message, even through these simple images, is what's presented to us through great art, through great representation.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Yeah, very, very helpful. And you also write here that narrative in particular is indispensable for human happiness. This is getting into verbal representation now. We live on stories. We need stories. And then you go into this on fiction writers, that fiction writers, particularly contemporary fiction writers, have a moral obligation not to present the world in a way that makes it seem awful. You say that the artist and the fiction writer is meant to find in the good in things, the good that's already there, and the good that can serve as an inspiration to seek what is higher. If you can't find something of worth to write about, how can it be worthwhile to write at all? The power of representation is meant to be a joy. Again, it's meant to delight, to celebrate what's out there, and by implication, to celebrate what God has made, what he has done and will do. Are there any specific narratives that come to mind that do this well?
Well, of course, as I mentioned in there, this is the art form Jesus used. Jesus gave us parables, and these stories have blown the world away ever since. These simple but profound, I mean, profound doesn't even begin to say it, these bottomless stories of truth, goodness, and beauty. So what I really recommend is don't read something if after you put it down, you're less happy about your life. All the arts are supposed to put us more in touch with the world that God has made. So don't, and this is true for everything, for visual art, don't use art as a method for escaping the real world. Use it as a method for celebrating the real world. Whether it's too sensational, so it makes reality look uninteresting, or whether it's dark and twisted, so it makes reality look bad. That can't be the point. You have to really take the time to find good stuff. Profound, thoughtful, beautiful, but good. Or you are being led away from the ultimate Christian truth of our existence, which is that reality, even though it's complicated, is good and delightful. That's got to be the fundamental takeaway when you're engaging with visual stuff and fiction. You need good visual stuff and fiction. And let me say this one more time. You need good images. So if you have, for instance, as many men do, if you have awful sexual images stuck in your brain, you need to invest in beautiful, sacred, or natural images that you can summon up to displace those awful images. If you have an ugly narrative for your life and the other people's lives, you need to read good stories that will help you recast the world as it really is, which is exciting and surprising and good.
Yeah. And speaking of the good stuff, real quick, we're about to hit the break. We probably only have about 20, 30 seconds, but any movies, any films come to mind that you have found that you would recommend?
Oh yeah, there's great stuff out there. I mean, I like Soul as a cartoon movie for the whole family. But obviously there's fantastic movies like A Hidden Life or Of Gods and Men. There's beautiful stuff out there. You just got to look pretty hard.
This is Jesuit Father Robert McTagg, your dearly host of the Catholic Current. Join me on Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern for another round of Let's Talk About This, when we'll walk through a complex issue together. My question is, where do we go from here? Catholics in America as citizens and disciples are confused and discouraged. What can we do about it? Find out on the Catholic Current on Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, coming to you from the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Join the Station of the Cross every Saturday morning at 9 after the 8 a.m. Holy Mass and Sunday afternoons at 2 for a teaching episode on the Catechism of the Catholic Church. You'll learn the essential and fundamental content of our Catholic faith and morals in a complete and concise way with clarity and charity. That's Saturday mornings at 9 and Sunday afternoons at 2 here on the Station of the Cross, Catholic Media Network, and the free iCatholic Radio mobile app. Hear a powerful sermon you need to share with a loved one? Maybe there's a guest, prayer, or teaching segment that deserves another listen. You can listen to any of our network-produced programs at your convenience by finding us wherever you enjoy podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podbean, and the free iCatholic Radio app. Be uplifted in your faith. Listen today at thestationofthecross.com or on your favorite podcasting platform.
I might have gone to church, at Christmas time, gradually quit going. It's not as scary as I thought it was. It's a much more warm and open place, and God really is about love. It's not about the rules and the things that I remember as a young child. It really is about the love that God has for each one of us that's so deep and wonderful.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church for any reason, visit CatholicsComeHome.org.
The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here. Very grateful to have Dr. John Mark Miravalle back with us today, discussing part 2 of his book, Beauty, What It Is and Why It Matters, SophiaInstitute.com. Final segment here. We're getting into chapter 10, Beautiful Functionality. You write that, interestingly, the arts involved with beautifying useful things are particularly prone to 2 radically different temptations: vain extravagance and pure functionality. How do we avoid these temptations?
Well, similarly to what we were talking about before, we have to really examine ourselves and see how much our ego is getting involved. That's point 1, is to say, look, am I pursuing this because I like it, because it's good, because it's delightful, or because it makes me think I'm a bigger deal and makes other people think I'm a bigger deal? That's always toxic to anything worthwhile. And then secondly, we have to actually invest. We have to say, you know what, I'm going to work to make my surroundings beautiful. I'm going to work to develop beauty in my environment and in the lives of other people. And that means I'm not just going to deal with a sort of minimalistic functionality. In other words, I'm not going to say, as long as it works, I don't care how it looks. How it looks actually matters, because God gave us eyes and asked that those eyes be avenues of spiritual reality. So yeah, we should care how it looks, not because we care how we look, but because we care about our souls and the souls of other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you apply this to architecture for us?
Yeah, this is less focused on individual choices, because a lot of us don't have as many options to sort of choose the kind of house we'd like ideally. But let's put it this way. We shouldn't spend too much on a house because it's impressive to other people. So that's pretty straightforward. And by the way, almost all of us are tempted to get too much house, because the house is the one possession which is most likely to become the symbol of our own ego. And it's been that way since the Tower of Babel. So we have to be very careful there. And then secondly, we have to remember that our house is a source of visual experience to the people around us, whether we like it or not. So letting your house turn into a dump, letting the grass, be completely out of control, letting the broken window theory of urban decline says that when you have broken stuff around, it actually encourages vice in the neighborhood. So we actually have to serve other people by trying to make sure that our house is a source of beauty and not ugliness for others. That doesn't mean we go over the top, but it does mean that we don't just let things fall into a shambles, because that's not serving the cause of beauty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Regarding culinary art, you write this passage, you write, "I hope every mother and every community chef knows how much she beautifies human life by not just giving up and doing the same thing again and again, or constantly resorting to cheap, popular, prepackaged junk that the kids will resist less. Even if you begrudge this part of your work, when you put time and effort into it, know that your self-sacrifice goes a long way toward edifying the people you serve. You're not just catering to people's bodies, you're taking care of their souls in a very particular way." Can you share a little bit more on this? I mean, it calls back up to mind what we were talking about earlier about, to do these little things for the glory of God, to have that pure intention on it, and to know that it's important and that God sees, even if nobody else does. But what else can you share with us on this?
Yeah, so there's two things. One is, again, to thank all those moms and other people who prepare food, and they put creativity into it. There is as much order and surprise in the foods of the world as in any other art form. And God has made us so that we are designed to encounter beauty 3 times a day. It's an unbelievable thing. And secondly, so that's point one, is thanks to these artists, thanks to these moms, thanks to these chefs. They may not feel very confident, but to the extent that they are trying to put this order and surprise into our food, it's an unbelievable service to our souls, which were made for order and surprise. But the second point, which is also crucial, is this requires that all of us, young and old, develop some level of appreciation for the beauty of food, that we expand our palate. Jesus says, "Eat what is set before you." That's a divine command to be responsive to the generosity of someone who has prepared you a meal. How do you do that? Well, you do it like you develop every other appreciation for an art: training, effort, and time. Nobody comes out of the womb appreciating good music. Nobody comes out of the womb appreciating fine art. Nobody comes out of the womb appreciating different kinds of food. So that is a key part of all human education. And by the way, I still have to develop mine. I mean, my palate has expanded in the last 20 years. There's some areas where it needs to continue expanding so that I don't react with revulsion to actually good stuff that people serve me. But I want to say that's a moral requirement. St. Thomas says that the vice of gluttony is not just about eating too much. It's actually sometimes about refusing to eat certain foods. So this is an area of human development. I push this a lot on the seminarians. I say, you will sin more likely by not eating than by eating too much. If you represent the church and people serve you at their homes and you push away something they've worked hard on because you don't like it, that's a real disservice to beauty, and it's a disservice to the gospel. So this is an area where I think especially Americans, who tend to be pretty uncouth, I know I do, in this area, need to develop greater sensitivity to beauty as a way of developing charity and as a way of enjoying life more.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, this is an area I got to say that I have not thought much about, pretty poorly formed in it, I would say. I mean, when I think about exactly what you're talking about there, I would even just think about it more like, well, don't be spoiled. Just eat it, even if you don't like it, you know. But yeah, if you could actually like appreciate it and have your palate developed so that you can enjoy the goodness that they've put before you. Obviously, that's a bit of a higher thing there. So yeah, that's wonderful. We only have a few minutes to go. Anything else you want to share with us today on this part, on the entire part of this book that we're going through today? If we have time, I have one more thing I would like to get back into, but anything else you want to share with us today?
I would suggest that one of the things that will really help us is to spend more time with still images, with still art, to have a favorite statue or a favorite crucifix, to have a book of Henry Asawa Tanner, who's an incredible Christian artist, the first African-American artist to become celebrated, does beautiful work, both at the level of nature and the level of supernature. To invest in images and to sit before them and be still, that has a very transformative effect. It makes it easier to notice the things that we need to notice. Remember, when you watch a video, the camera moves so that you see what the people want you to see. And that actually reduces your ability to notice things. This is a point that Pieper makes. To sit before something in quiet and stillness and to notice the details of an image is something that can really make you a fuller human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, outstanding. Yeah, the part I was going to get back into was the parables. I will say, if you get this book and read that section about Jesus and the parables and why he's giving us parables under verbal representation in the chapter on beautiful representations, I mean, it gives you a way of thinking about those parables in a new way that I had not considered, that really actually helps me to open up all of them a bit more and get to the truth of what Jesus is really trying to put across to us. But you'll have to get the book, I guess, because we don't have time to get into that today. You can get it at sophiainstitute.com. Again, it's Beauty, What It Is and Why It Matters, sophiainstitute.com. And we'll be back with part 3 in a few weeks. But Dr. John Mark Miravalle, thank you so much. God bless you all.